Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents and my hat in the ring here when it comes to this Delphi investigation. For those of you who are new or don't know, uh, Liberty German and Abigail Williams were two teenage girls that were unfortunately and sadly brutally murdered in Indiana on February 13th, 2017, by police or authorities believe this man here, also known as Bridge Guy. And there's been a lot of speculation whether or not this is a cold case. There's been a lot of names thrown out there, but I'm making this video today not to throw names out there, but to kind of hopefully jog somebody's thought process or to kind of put what I think could be some ways that you could help catch this guy, this sick, sick individual. Um, I think a lot of, first of all, I'd like to say that I've been spending a year as an investigative journalist studying this case. I've been to Delphi, unlike some of the internet sleuths, driven through the town, got the lay of the land, seen what things are like out there. So I have quite a bit of background knowledge having studied this case. I think the Indiana State Police, FBI, and everybody else genuinely are trying to do their best to solve this case. I think that they do have probably a lot of information and good information and evidence, as they've said that the crime scene was pretty vast. I'd like to credit Doug Carter, the superintendent, Tobe Lesenby, everybody involved. You can tell they really care about catching this sick individual. On to my point. I think in the internet sleuthing community, and maybe in the police, I don't know, I'm not part of the investigation, there's way too many people who are focusing on what happened. How did the murder go on? How did, all wanting to know all the details instead of focusing on what we already know. And there's a lot we already know. And I think these are really, really important clues that are going overlooked. And I'll break these down here real quick for everybody. Um, the first thing that I think will help solving this case is knowing, was it a coincidence or not that this happened on a day that the girls were off of school? Now, if you don't know, they were off of school that day. It was a snow day from what I understand. Was it a coincidence or not that happened? I think investigators and people should focus on that. I'm sure they have to some degree already, but I think that's a real big point of emphasis. The fact this happened not just on a school day that they were off, but in broad daylight. The, for lack of a better word, the stones that it takes for somebody to commit a crime like that, even in a rural area like this, in broad daylight, is pretty bold and nervy. Uh, that's the most shocking thing about this to me, is the fact that it happened, like I said, even though it was in a rural, isolated area in broad daylight. So if you're the family and you're listening to this, if you're their friends, if you're the police, you really need to hone in on that. The fact that this happened when they were off of school, and also what was this guy doing there on that day? If he has a job, why wasn't he at that job that day? Why is he off that specific day? These are all clues. And they're clues that need to be thoroughly investigated, even if you need to start from scratch, inside and out. Why was this man not at work during a weekday? Was he out of a job? And one of the things, there's a lot of speculation that this was somebody who is local, and that very well may be, but you can't, like, the first thing when I saw this video a year ago, the first thing that screamed out to me was, this guy looks like the kind of thing you'd see like a truck driver or somebody wear, this kind of outfit. And again, I'm not saying that's the case, but I think you need to kind of broaden your horizons and expand your mind that this might not be somebody local at this point, because they probably would have been turned in. And when I say local, I know that, you got to remember Lafayette's a pretty big city with a lot of people around. That's pretty close by. The person could still be somewhere in Indiana, but a little further away than you think. When I listen to his voice, I hear that drawl. It reminds me of when he says guys down the hill. The fact that he addresses them as guys, I can't escape that. Almost like, he's in command or in charge or has experience being in charge of or around kids or as a parent himself. These are all clues, if you ask me. He seems to have this southern, like, it's almost like a Georgian. I know people from Georgia. It almost sounds like a Georgia, southern Indiana, Kentucky, like slight southern kind of drawl when he talks and says guys down the hill. I think that's a big clue as well. But what? Why wasn't this guy at work this day? Does he have a business that he attends to where he can just kind of drive around and do what he wants? Was he in town on a stopover or a layover and knew that because he was only briefly in town, that's why he could get away? I think these are all big, big red flags and clues and things that the investigators really need to start focusing more on and telling the public that they need to focus on the things that they do have instead of speculating about what might have happened. We know he's got this blue jacket, and the way it shines in the sun, I wish the police or Superintendent Carter or Tobe Lesenby or somebody would let us know, is this a nylon jacket that this guy's wearing? Because that's not a very common thing. Is it a cotton jacket? The way it shines off the sun, when I watch the video, it almost seems like it's sort of a nylon type of jacket. Is it buttoning up in front? Does it zip up? Any little detail that we already may know that you could go into more detail about that might help a family member or a friend or somebody jog their memory. Also, in all of the chat boards and message boards and sites that I've seen, nobody seems to ever talk about definitively whether or not this guy has a beret on, whether that's a hat. The first time I saw the video, I thought it was like one of those big winter hats with like floppy ear coverings. There's just rampant speculation. If the police or FBI or somebody knows for certain what type of hat this individual on the bridge was wearing, any minor detail like that could be what breaks the case or has a family member say, wow, I know this person has this type of hat. I know this person has, this type of jacket that's nylon that buttons up. It might be that one little detail that finally pushes somebody over the edge to call in. The other thing to the family, did the girls talk about going to the Monon High Bridge where this happened at any point during the preceding days to anybody else besides the family? Were they out at a park and did you hear them talking about it then around other people? Were they at a restaurant and talking about it, the possibility of it happening? Or was it just a split-second decision that day and that was the only time they talked about it? I think that if there's any recollection that you have of them talking about this in the presence of anybody else, I think that's a potential clue. Just, again, we need to focus on the things that we already know about this case. Stop wondering over and over, why don't the police release this? They have very darn good reason why they don't release some of these things. I was involved in finding. I was working at an editor for a site online one time as a newspaper editor, and somebody turned a tip in, and it ended up solving an 18-year-old cold case in Illinois, where after 18 years they finally brought charges, and in that case they already had the person's DNA under the girl's fingernails, but it was somebody who already knew her, so just that DNA alone wasn't enough to convict him. There had to be something else, and it wasn't until somebody else came forward that said, hey, this person talked to me about this, or that was a witness, and after a tip that they left on our site that we turned in, that they were finally able to solve this case with certainty. You don't want to go into a courtroom and present evidence and have it thrown out and have this sick guy get off and go out and do this again sometime. That's the last thing you want. So the investigators have good reason, whether they have DNA or not, or they have a partial fingerprint. Trust me, they're doing everything they can in their power to possibly solve this case with the resources they have. The other thing is, everybody seems to be stuck on profiling, what's typical, what isn't. This guy behaved this way, this guy behaved that way. And I think sometimes we get too stuck on that because while profiling is a really, really good way to solve a crime, there are tons of serial killers or other people throughout history who have admitted they have changed their methods in order to try and throw the police off. Now, this has been described by investigators as a bizarre crime scene. We don't know if that was to throw them off. We don't know if that was by design to communicate a message. Only the police know that. But the point being, don't always assume that there has to be a pattern or that somebody is following a pattern that other killers or other people have followed just because it fits a profile. Start thinking outside of the box a little bit. Start considering maybe this person wasn't local, or maybe this person, wasn't from around Delphi. Because like I said, if that's the case, you would think somebody would have turned them in yet, given the fact that we know what this guy's hat looks like, his jacket, his walk, his voice. So any little detail, like I mentioned earlier, that investigators can, I think they need to do a public relations kind of blitz. And I think they've done a good job of getting information out to the public, but there's things they need to clarify. They need to clarify why they have both sketches out there and say the one is primary, the other is secondary. What is the reason for that? Without revealing too much information, obviously there was some sort of a tip or that led them to believe the second sketch that they show, which is this one down here, the more recently released one. And then they said this one up here will become secondary. Were there two people involved? I know there's been discussion of that. Is that why there's the conflicting photo? And so, unfortunately, the problem is there's so much conflicting information and misinformation out there and speculation. If you're the police, if you're the family, focus on some of those things I mentioned. Like I said, why wasn't that guy working that day? Is it a coincidence that the girls were off school that day? Just little things like that. The fact that it happened in broad daylight. Just focus on what we know and hammer those points home to the public. If you're the police, again, I want to reiterate, what type of a hat was that? Is he wearing? Are they able to, even though the photo and the video are grainy, can you tell us, is that a regular baseball cap? Is that some sort of a unique style of cap? If you know, as the police or the family, tell people that could push somebody to make a tip that'll change this case. Do they know if that's a pouch or just that he's reaching into in the picture? That whatever little details investigators might think might not be a big deal, please let us know. Let us know, is that a zip up or a button up jacket? Is it a nylon jacket? Just any little minor thing about what we already know that you can enhance the information about. I'm telling you, that is what needs to be done. Thanks for listening to my video, everybody. If, anybody else out there has information, be sure to send it to the Carroll County Sheriff's Department or the tip line. You can do that anonymously. Again, my heart goes out to the family and friends of these two girls, because I can't even imagine what it's like to go through that. But let's focus on what we do know, because there's a lot of things we do know. And I think that it would be great for investigators to kind of step outside the box and say, hey, we think it's this type of hat. Hey, it's this type of jacket specifically. Any little thing is going to be what breaks this case. And let's not rule out, that you have the person's voice. Focus on what we know.